वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम्
Is welcome to take a copy, get it signed and enjoy reading it. It's a very charming, very charming book. Come, please come. It is indeed an evening where we gather here today for yet another session of the Right Circle in Chennai, organized by Prabha Khaitan Foundation. I'm Vidya Singh, Ehsaas Woman of Chennai, and I warmly welcome you to an evening I believe will bring out an enriching conversation and a lot of literary and mythological takeaways, which is what the book is, Satyarth's book is all about. Today we gather here in the spirit of celebration, unity and a shared love for the English language and literature. Today's event is in association with ITC Grand Chola Hotel, Chennai, and the tireless efforts and constant support of Ehsaas Women of Chennai, myself and Deepika Goyal and Kaveri Lalchand. The three of us are the three friends who handle all Prabha Khaitan's events in Chennai. And we're happy to say that Prabha Khaitan has now started inviting us, like they've invited Praneet to come from Amritsar to do the talk. I went to Coimbatore to do a talk with Kiran Manral, another author. So I think it's making it interesting, a little bit of cross-bonding from different states, cities. Today we are privileged to have with us Satyarth Nayak to grace the occasion with his presence and give us the opportunity to listen to him in close quarters as he takes us through his experiences and reflections with today's moderator, Praneet Babbar, Ehsaas Woman of Amritsar. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk about PKF and the women behind it. Prabha Khaitan, Dr. Prabha Khaitan, who was a humanitarian and supported socio-cultural causes. Dr. Khaitan was an eminent Indian literature, philanthropist, social worker, entrepreneur, and a feminist who established the foundation and believed in unity in diversity. PKF, Prabha Khaitan Foundation, organizes authors' meets, book launches, literary fests, panel discussions, boutique festivals, and events of performing arts in different languages. She was the founder of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, an organization dedicated to socio-cultural and humanitarian welfare in 1980 to work for a better tomorrow. To drive the machinery of the organization, and it is embodied in her famous words, Karam hi Jeevan hai, work is life. Charting a glorious 40-year journey, the foundation has gone only onwards and upwards by launching many initiatives to further the cause that Dr. Khaitan envisaged. To create awareness in the community, we uphold one pressing social issue every month. We are elated to share that the 3-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage, the man behind the anthem and signature caller tune of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, who has curated 12 amazing musical pieces to score across video invites of events and social media platforms. This July, the cause of the month is One Family. The song is named Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which literally means the world is one family. This is to encourage us humans to live in harmony with all species of living beings. Let me ask Deepika Goyal here to introduce.
Satyarth Nayak is an Indian author and screenwriter known for his best-selling novel, The Emperor's Riddles, authoring the biography of Sri Devi, the eternal screen goddess, and for scripting Sony's historical television epic Horus. His debut novel, a best-selling thriller, The Emperor's Riddles, earned comparisons to Dan Brown for History Meets Mystery. His new book, the magnum opus Mahagatha, is an epic collection of 100 greatest mythological tales from the Puranas of Hinduism. Anand Neelakanthan has described it as a must-have in your home library. With his short stories winning the British Council Award and appearing in Sudha Murthy's anthology, Something Happened on the Way to Heaven, he is named one of the top 50 authors to follow on social media. So we have one more person to follow on our social media accounts. He is currently scripting a high-profile web series for Mythoverse and writing his next biography of another luminary of Indian cinema. In conversation with Satyarth, we have Praneet Babbar,
SS woman of Amritsar and of course from Chennai. She is an accomplished architect and founder of the Fulkari Women of Amritsar.
She is also a literary enthusiast and a language aficionado. And without any further ado, I hand over to Praneeth to kickstart this conversation.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today with us. I've had an incredible few days reading Mahabharata, and I'm blown away with what it takes to write this book, the information in this book, and I want to start by thanking you for bringing us this book, truly. So, just in a little nutshell, I'm going to start by first talking about Mahabharata, because that's what we're all waiting to hear about, and then we'll talk to Satyarth about his life, right? So a couple of things. The book throws up several questions at us. The answers, as you well know, are between the lines in the stories. It brings forth the ideas that natural laws are to establish the fact that the universe is finite and immortal beings are infinite. To let it be known that good triumphs over evil, and the good karmas bring about good results, and the bad karmas throw an immortal into a never-ending cycle of birth and death. Could you talk to us about the natural laws?
Right. First of all, before I do that, thank you, PK, for having me here again. This is my second session with them after Calcutta, so very excited, always happy to collaborate with you, and always happy to come to Chennai. I have fond memories of this city. My dad was posted here for a few years. He was Commissioner, Customs Central Excise, and it is in Chennai, actually in Bangalore, that he passed away. So we have bittersweet memories of this city. I did my course of journalism here at Asian College. So again, a very, very deep-rooted memory there. And I still have family here who are here supporting me today, as all families do. So thank you again for all of you for being here. So it's true that when I entered the universe of the Puranas, it was staggering to find the kind of natural laws that operate within. Because the concept of our Brahmanda as versus the Western Brahmanda is very different. Western Brahmanda is a more binary concept where it is about good versus evil. There are binaries of heaven and hell, devil and the God. That doesn't operate in our system. Ours is a much more complex Brahmanda where everything is a grey zone. In fact, the word evil doesn't even exist in the Puranas. We do not have that concept. It is ultimately about karma and karma phal. So what you do, you either suffer or you are either rewarded. That is what it is. It is not about whether you've done something right or wrong. It is about your actions and the consequences. So that is what it is, and what is wonderful is how the laws remain the same for gods and humans. It doesn't matter. So our Brahmanda does not discriminate between gods and humans. I mean, there's a very a story that completely illustrates that. So something happens because of which Brahma starts lusting after his own daughter. Now when that happens, Mahadev comes and he beheads one of the heads of Brahma. Now what Mahadev did was right, because that was justified. And yet Mahadev is told that you have committed a sin of Brahmahatya, because killing Brahma's head amounts to Brahmahatya. So what happens is that severed head of Brahma, it attaches itself to Shiva's hand. And Shiva now has to walk the entire universe looking for salvation. I mean, imagine Mahadev, Devagadev, is roaming the three worlds looking for salvation. And he goes to the heavens, he goes to the hell, nothing. There's no salvation anywhere. After a point, even that head starts rotting and the flesh falls, and all that is left is a skull, which then gives Shiva the name Kapali, because that is the form, where reminding him of his constant guilt. Finally, he enters Earth, and as he's roaming Earth, at one particular point, the skull detaches itself, and he knows that I have been purged. That spot today is Varanasi, or Kashi, which is supposed to be the place where you go to get your sins washed. So the idea is that no matter whether you are human or divine, the rules remain the same.
You reiterate the idea that in the Puranas that there is no simplified dichotomy of the good and the evil, but a highly complex cosmos, right? Where even devas can act well, Asuras can act virtuous. So,
It's like, if you want to illustrate that, and there are many examples of that. I mean, Indra is a god, we all know that, but Indra is constantly, he lives in perpetual fear of losing his throne. So he does the most despicable things in many stories, which a demon would not do. I mean, Indra, for example, the height of his insecurity is when he enters the womb of pregnant woman to destroy her fetus. Because there has been ordained that that fetus would grow up and be a threat to his throne. So that is the height that Indra has gone, who is called the Devaraja, the king of gods. And then we have demons like Bala, who are so virtuous that when they give up their bodies in sacrifice, their bodies disintegrate to create 9 wonders, which today we call the Navaratna. So the 9 gems come from Bala. Or there is a demon called Bali, from when Vishnu comes as Vanu Avatar. He tells him that you have to give up what you have won. Bali bows before Vishnu and they say down to Patal. So when you see that kind of dichotomy operating, it's suddenly you realizing that there's such a gray zone, where nothing is so black and white. We talk about 50 shades of grey, the Puranas have 5 million shades of grey, and that is what it operates in. So it's fascinating to enter that world and discover those various shades of grey.
Yeah. The other really interesting part of your book is
The structure, right? From what I understand, and I'm no expert on the Puranas, that it is each of these 36 Puranas are based on a particular god,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Whereas the book that you put together, it's story-like.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that for the audience?
So in the Puranas, the concept of time is cyclical, because we believe in the cycle of preservation, creation, preservation, destruction, and that keeps happening again and again. But when I entered this world and I was reading all these stories, what struck me is that I had no idea that what I have always grown up thinking to be standalone events, actually every story has a past and a present. Every story has a cause and an effect, and that for me was staggering to know. So for example, if there is a story, so we have all grown up hating Ravan. Ravan is the one who abducted Sita. Even today, Ravan is burnt. So even after so many years, we still haven't pardoned Ravan for what he did, right? For his enmity against Ram and all of that. Ravan is the ultimate evil figure.
Yeah.
And yet, I come across a story in the Satyuga, which tells me that, so when Brahma created the universe, he created the first 4 sons who came out of Brahma are called the Manas Putras, because they came out of his Manas or his mind. And now these Manasputras did not want to be a part of the creation process. They told Brahma that we are happy just wandering around and learning. So we choose the spiritual path over the physical path. So let us be in this childlike form forever. Let us go around searching and absorbing knowledge. And Brahma allows them to do that. Now these 4 children come to Vaikuntha to see Vishnu. Vaikuntha has 2 Dwarpals, Jaya and Vijay, who are 2 brothers. And of course, they don't let these kids in. Hello, you are kids. What are you doing here? If you want to see Vishnu, that's not possible. You just can't have 4 kids walking in to see Vishnu without knowing that these are the 4 Manasputras. So the Manasputras curse Jaya and Vijay that since you are so arrogant of your position, you are not able to understand that you cannot stand between a devotee and the god. We punish you that you should no longer be next to Vishnu. You should no longer be a part of Vaikuntha. And you will now take birth on earth. And they leave. They fall at the feet of Vishnu that please help us, we cannot be away from you. Vishnu says, I cannot modify the curse, it's too powerful. What I can do is I can give it some sort of a timeline. So I give you 2 choices. You can either take 7 births on earth, but you will be my friend in all these 7 births. Or you take 3 births, but all these 3 births you will be my enemy on earth. What will you choose? They think and they say, even if it's 3 births, we will still go for that, even if it means we'll be your foes. Because we cannot be away from you for 7 births, that's too much. So he agrees and he says, in the first birth, when you both are born, you will be Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, the 2 brothers. That is in Satyuga. In Treta Yuga, you will be Ravan and Kumbhakarna. And in Dwapar Yuga, you will be Shishupal and his cousin. So now when you see this, suddenly the idea of Ravan completely changes. That this was hatred born out of love. That he said, and both the brothers at the end say that whenever we are born, please make sure that we die by your hands. And Vishnu says, yes, that is how it will happen. So then suddenly your mind is completely gobsmacked. Everything that one has read and one has known suddenly acquires this whole larger picture. That is what Mahabharata does. If you read every story has a cause and effect. Every story has something that happened in the past that suddenly gives you a new perspective. So I think what Mahabharata does is kind of zooms out and gives you a very holistic view of the entire Brahmanda that we operate in. So,
what was interesting is that through the entire book, Satyarth has not put in there's no morals, right? These are just stories. And it's for everybody to derive their own conclusions from this.
I was very clear about that. This is not a moral science book. I am not going to impose my learnings and my interpretation on my readers. Everyone needs to engage with the book themselves, and ultimately, as per your own worldview, your own thinking, your own mind, you will draw your. Because see, like I said, the Puranas are a grey zone of stories. So I will see something very differently. You will see something very differently. Right. Like there's a story where Ram kills a Shudra because the Shudra was chanting the Vedas. And in Treta Yuga, it was prohibited that the Shudras cannot chant the Vedas. And because of what he was doing, it was creating unrest in Ayodhya. Some even said that it was leading to the deaths of people because of what he was doing. So the actions were harming his people. So Ram tries to persuade him not to do so. When he doesn't agree, Ram beheads him. Now there can be two schools of thought here. One, that Ram did what he had to do because he was the king. And as a king, you are morally bound to save your people, to do what is good for your land. On the other hand, the other debate is this is caste oppression. This is about the higher caste imposing the rules on the low caste and defending and ultimately killing them if they don't follow. Yeah. So what is my learning, what is your learning, it will be very different. Yeah. So because of that very reason, I said let these stories be the way they are. My readers, when they read and engage, they will find their own morals. Yeah.
So what I really, the realization really comes to you when you read the book. It's like an epiphany. It dawns on you. It's not told in words, but really it's an uncanny realization that comes to you when you're reading these stories. And for a lay person like me, it's very, very easy to relate to and understand what the Puranas are about, what what the stories are, the cause, effect, and the explanation really, you have a common thread of karma. Yes. And the theory of karma that runs through this, and that applies to everybody. Absolutely. Whether you're mortal, immortal, everybody is subject to karma. Absolutely. Would you like to talk more on that?
Yeah, like there are so many stories that talk about it. Like we spoke about Ram and we spoke about Vishnu. Even when he's born as Krishna, for example. So Krishna is killed by Jara, at the end of the Mahabharata war. And then so when Jara realizes that he has his arrow has hit Krishna himself, he falls terrified at his feet and said, I'll burn in hell. I have killed Krishna. And Krishna says, no, you will not. You did not kill me. I was sitting here waiting for you. Why? Because in Treta Yuga, you were Bali and I was Ram. And it was my arrow that had pierced you. And so that was one debt that I owed. And I told you that when we could take birth again in Dwapar Yuga, you will kill me exactly the way I had killed you. So everything is a cycle. Everything. So no action can be seen in isolation. When you see something, you immediately need to realize that there is a whole lot of backstory that has gone in. So ultimately, these 100 stories are like a link each in a chain of narratives. Everything is one chain, one link. And that is the reason we call this book Mahabharata, because while these are 100 stories, ultimately there are 100 chapters in one epic story, which is why that is that one Mahabharata, that is the name of the book.
Yeah. So I want to quote something from the book. When Shiva brought forth immortals in his own image, Brahma said to him, you can't produce immortals because you will tilt the essential balance of the universe. Humans must die and be born again, like the very universe they inhabit, which faces the pralaya after every yuga. So we truly get the essence of the Puranas from Brahma himself, right? Yes. How do you interpret that in modern day times? What would the relevance of the Puranas be in today's world?
Okay. I think, like I said, one of the things that we need to understand in the Puranas is, like I said, one, that we do not judge something as fast as we tend to, because like I said, everything, every action, every reaction has a context, everything has some sort of a backstory. So when you look at actions and you immediately judge the person, the Puranas teach us that's not what it is. It is ultimately about that everything is a part of a course. Everything is a continuum, and we are all living in that continuum, and our actions and reactions are constantly impacting each other. So that is what it is. Also, the idea, like I said, the idea of that the rules apply equally to everybody. So the fact that how fair is this Brahmanda, Also, I think another very fascinating thing I find in the Puranas is the image of the Ardhanarishvara. I mean, when you look at the image, biologically, of course, it's the male and the female principles coming together to create. But when I look at the image, I see a deeper meaning there. I see that if you have one narrative, you must have a counter narrative. It's only when those two operate and come together can there be a third and a new narrative. So if there is Vad, there has to be Vivad. Only then can there be Samvad. If that is not the case, you will stagnate. So today when we are being told in the country that there is one grand narrative that we need to support and every other narrative is false, there's one grand Hindu narrative. That is not what the Puranas are telling me. They're saying every narrative needs to have a counter narrative. Everything can be questioned and countered, and only when that vivad happens can we evolve and go to the next stage. There's so much the Puranas tell you that we don't, that we have just completely forgotten.
But maybe that's all part of a grand monumental design, and we don't know what that other grand picture is. We're only seeing this part of it at the moment. And as you said, there's nothing that's haphazard in the universe. So honestly, modern day commentary on, the current narrative is probably something of a much larger picture that we don't see right now. I read a comment somewhere that I found interesting, which says, the Puranas are a testament to the imagination of our sages. What do you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are so many stories here that just tell you how wise our sages were and the kind of wisdom they have and how a lot of the Puranas actually is born out of that wisdom, It's amazing to see. I mean, I can pick out any story and you'll find one rishi, one hermit there, and how, maybe you can have a slightly funnier story here because we've had a lot of serious stories so far. So there's a story where the Vindhya mountain hears that Sumeru is the tallest mountain. Narad comes and tells him, Narad being the perpetual troublemaker, comes and tells Sumeru that, Vindhya, that, Sumeru is way more taller than you, way more beautiful than you. And immediately Vindhya is filled with jealousy and pride, that how can that be? So another interesting aside, the Puranas also do that, is that they give a lot of natural objects human emotions. And suddenly you realize that even through those stories, they're giving us a lot of wisdom. So you have a mountain that can be jealous, you have a flower that tells a lie, you have a cow that tells a lie, so you have a river that suddenly is afraid. So a lot of natural objects are also given human emotions. So anyways, back to the story. So Vindhya overnight goes high up, and now it's the tallest. And because it goes so tall, that it now obstructs the passage of the sun. The sun can no longer take its chariot and move around the earth. And the gods come and tell Vindhya that, this is foolishness. Because of you, the earth is suffering. One half is full of light, blinding light. The other half is completely dark. But Vindhya says, I don't care. I'm the tallest right now. So then they come to sage Agastya. And Agastya is told, please help us. Please drill some sense in this block of rock. So Agastya goes, and first of all, he understands that the mountain will respond only to flattery. And he says, you're tall, you're beautiful, all of that. I need to go south. Could you just lower your slopes for me? Once you do, I'll go and I'll come back in a jiffy. Then you can again rise yourself up. And Vindhya says, of course. Vindhya lowers itself down. Agastya crosses and goes to the south. And Vindhya is still waiting. So a lot of our sages had a lot of wisdom that comes across beautifully in these stories.
Right. So these are 100 stories that you have taken out of 36 Puranas. How did you choose 100?
So in fact, the initial list was around 250 stories because that's the kind of material that the Puranas offer. I, of course, went about choosing like the best of the best out of all these stories. So I basically had a three-pronged criteria. One, of course, was just how interesting was the story. It had to linger in your mind after you've read it. That was very important for me. Also, who were the characters involved in the story? What was the dramatis personae? Who were the gods, the humans? What was that about? And finally, if it was a lesser known story and it deserved a wider audience, like the story of Swaha, for example, that not many people knew about,
Right.
that I think everybody has fallen in love with that story about Swaha and the goddess and how she saves the gods.
Yeah.
So gems like those, very, very hardly known, but which deserved a wider audience. So those I found a place.
So Satyarth, moving on from the book, he truly has the Midas touch, by the way. Just before this, his last project was the screenplay for Porous, which went on to become India's first global TV series and the first show to reach even Japan. It has been dubbed and subbed in many languages and already sold to over 11 countries and 14 territories. As a writer, how do you switch between the two fields? Between writing, screenplay. One you have complete control, one you don't. How does that work?
It is. Like you said, writing a book is, of course, you are the sole master of that project. But when you become a screenplay writer, you suddenly have a team. Then you need to be a team player. And everybody has a say. And so ultimately what you write, it needs to be approved, it needs to gel with everybody's mindsets, it needs to be, but I'll tell you the greatest learning that I had as a screenplay writer, which I think applies to anybody who wants to kind of explore both the genres. So there was this one particular scene in Porous that we were trying to crack, where Porous basically escapes with his family from the kingdom. So we wanted this massive action sequence, so I said, okay, let me think of something. So I went back home, and in my mind, I designed possibly the greatest action scene possible. So I came back the next day, kya scene likha hai? Just read this. And I had created this entire sequence where there's a huge watchtower that the king has constructed. That watchtower falls in the river Saraswati, because Saraswati, it was on the banks of the Sindhu that the kingdom was. It falls in the river. There's a tide that happens. There is a complete tsunami that happens. The entire city is flooded. And in that chaos, that watery chaos, Porous escapes with his family. And so my producer looks at me and says, this is really fabulous. I just wish we had the budget for Transformers. So that's when you realize that while imagination can go wild when you're writing your own book, when it comes to television, when it comes to putting something on screen, you have to write what can be achieved on screen. You have to write what is achievable on screen. So that day was a huge.
So you sort of become the producer in that sense then.
You kind of become the sort of the mediator, where you want a lot of your imagination to stay, because you know that this would look good on screen, and yet you also have to somewhere adjust yourself, align yourself with his vision and his economics.
The budget
of
too.
The show,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. As to what we can actually what is doable.
Right,
So
that's a heavy
that
burden to
consideration
carry.
has to come into play. Yeah.
So you're producer, financier, everything in your head at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning.
So moving on from Porous, again staying with the realm of Bollywood and Tollywood, was his biopic on Sridevi.
Yeah. Biography.
Biography, sorry, on Sridevi, right? First and foremost, why Sridevi?
Do I need to answer why Sridevi? In Chennai, you're asking why Sridevi? Come on.
Okay.
First female superstar.
That's
It ends there. I've been a huge admirer of her work for many years. And for me, it was appalling that there was not a single good book on her that captured her magnificent journey of 50 years that she had been on the celluloid. So, and for me, I've been wanting to do it for the longest time. But of course, I was initially based in Delhi, so that project seemed a little far off. 2017 was somehow when all the stars aligned. I shifted to Bombay because of Porous. And 2017 happened to be her 50th year in cinema, because Mom had just released as a 300th movie. So I said, this is the right time to, this is exactly the time that we should do. So I met her and Boni, and they were both very, very keen, and they wanted to go ahead with the book. But Shri said that she was at that point, she wanted to focus entirely on Janvi's upcoming debut, because Janvi's Dhadak was releasing in 2018. So her thing was, let Dhadak come out. Once that is out of the way, we shall get started with the book. So that was the original plan. Then, of course, she passed away before that. And I remember being completely shattered that how do I do the book in her presence? It just didn't seem possible enough. Then a friend of mine told a very beautiful thing. He said, do the book because you had spoken to her, you owe this book to her. He said, the only difference now is that your book will have a last chapter. So I said, that is what it should be. So that's how the journey began.
Tell us something about Sri Devi that you feel we don't adequately grasp.
That question is something that I find easier telling up north because people have no idea about her body of work down south. But people here, of course, know the actor that she was.
True.
I mean, up there they know about the Chandnis and the Chalwas and the English and all of that.
Right.
They have no idea about a Padinara Vedanile or a Mundram Pirai, or a Johnny or all these wonderful movies, whether it's Bharti Raja or Balu Mahendra, all of them.
Yeah.
So that solid body of work is something that they don't know up there. So I'm not sure what more can I enlighten a South Indian audience about Sri Devi, but I can talk about the various memories that like I said, in her absence, the only way I could do the book was to meet all the people that she worked with. So down south, I was very lucky to have interviewed Kamal Hassan sir and Rajnikant sir and Bharti Raja sir and K. Bhagyaraj, and they had amazing memories to share about. I remember a beautiful conversation with Saukar Janaki on the phone, and she had such amazing stories because she was there. The first movie that Sri Devi did as a child star was Thunai One, when she was only 4 years old, and she plays Lord Murga. She comes only in the end for 5 minutes. That was her screen entry, her debut.
Oh, wow.
And Saukar Janaki was there, and she says, so I said, can you please relive that moment for me? She said, it was amazing. This child walks into the set, and we are all mesmerized. We said, look at her eyes. They're angelic. We have to have her.
And
there
this
can't
is
be
at
anybody
5.
else. This is at 4. She was 4 years old when she did that
Brilliant.
movie. So she had the most affectionate things to talk about her and all of that. Rajni sir had a lot of memories when they were doing the movie where she plays his stepmother. Mundra Murchu, isn't it? Yeah. Mundra Murchu, exactly. And he plays, and she was only 13, and she was playing Rajnikant's stepmother in that movie.
Right.
And she says that so there was a scene where she had to wear a sari, and the director was K. Balachandar, and he gave her the sari and said, "Just come to the set. We're waiting for you." And she just would not come out of the room.
Right.
And then they all barge in, and she's standing with the sari saying, "I have no idea how do you wear a sari? What can you expect a 13-year-old to say?"
Yeah.
And she said, and apparently Balachandar sir had a huge temper. So
Okay.
at the moment he saw her, all his temper calmed down, and then they helped her out. So Rajni sir had amazing stories. Kamal sir had amazing stories to say. So I remember him telling me that Sridevi was a very gullible person at heart. He said we were once watching a Hindi movie, and none of us had any idea what was happening on screen because none of us knew Hindi.
Right.
And she would keep asking me, "What is happening?" And I would keep making up something and concocting something, and ye ho raha hai. She, "Acha, okay, all right. But didn't you say this and now this? Acha, okay." So he kept throughout the movie, I kept concocting scenes, concocting the story, and she accepted everything, every word that I said. She was that kind of a person. She was. And K. Balachandar had amazing memories of her because he had assisted Bharti Raja in the making of Padinara Vedanile. So he said that initially when she was just about 15, 16 in that movie. So he said, that she would be just a child, like a teenager, how they are, and she would not agree with continuity. Like if she has put one particular bindi, she would want a new bindi. She said, but this continuity hai, yahi lagana padega. And she would not understand those things, that I would have to fight with her, all of that. And then she said, one day she took revenge on me. So what I had done, that for one particular scene, they wanted a black hen, and they didn't have any black hens in that village. I don't know what village this was. Every village is supposed to have a black hen. This one did not have. So he said, I got a white hen, I colored it black using black ink, and she found out. And she went, and I'll tell. She kept threatening me, I'll tell the director. So all of those amazing stories. A lot of memories. Shruti Hassan had the most emotional things to talk about. Because they did Puli together, which is her last Tamil movie. She said, and Shruti said that at that point of time, I was myself not in a very happy state of mind, both personally and professionally. So she said, while I was working in that film, I was not feeling it, and I was not really giving it my best. And she said, then Shri ma'am comes on set, and I watch her. And I'm like, this is a woman who has been doing it for the past 50 years, and she's still raring to go. She's still wanting to give her best in every scene.
Yeah.
So before this, how can I not take my work seriously?
Yeah.
So I just realized that, she said a beautiful word. She said, I think Sri Devi had befriended Saraswati. That is what she had done. So I think so much to learn from her.
So, while Sri Devi, the book itself, talks about a strong woman, I know you have many strong women characters in Mahagatha as well. Your favorite story out of that, of the women characters?
Again, they're very difficult to pick. There's so many of wonderful stories, and the way the women is portrayed in our Puranas, it's staggering to see, because she is the ultimate nourishing agent, the ultimate nurturing agent. Today we talk about gender parity. Today we talk about all of that. The Puranas have celebrate gender parity, the way they talk about the Devi. So there's this amazing story where there's a person called Bhringi. So Bhringi comes to Shiv and says, I'm your devotee. I want to take 7 chakkars of you. Can I do that? Shiv says, please go ahead. And as he's about to start, Parvati comes and sits next to Shiva and says, listen, you cannot only circulate Shiv. It has to be Shiv and Shakti both, because we together make up the universe. But Bhringi is a Shiva devotee. He refuses. He starts circling only Shiva. Parvati comes and sits on Shiva's lap and says, now what will you do? So now it's a challenge between the two of them. Bhringi turns into an insect and starts hovering around the head of Shiva. Then Parvati says, fine. She starts fusing with Shiva as the Ardhanarishvara and says, now we are one body. What can you do now? Bhringi still doesn't give up. He now starts tunneling into the flesh, trying to create a tunnel through which he can still go around only Shiv. And now Parvati says that you are blind. You do not understand that the Brahmanda is a fusion of the male and the female. The Shiva and the Shakti are incomplete without each other. And because of this, I curse you. That from now on, you will only have muscle, flesh in your body and not bones. Because the Puranas say that the bones come from the mother and the flesh comes from the father. So as soon as he loses the bones, he collapses as a lump of flesh.
Is that what your
this is the Sati story. This is the story of Sati and Shiv. Yeah, that's separate. But it is the same form.
Can you talk about
it's the same
cover?
form.
So through the book, there are several illustrations as well. Very, very interesting illustrations. I've come to the same. The cover, of course, is absolutely gorgeous. And I'll ask Satyarth to give that story. But throughout, there's brilliant illustrations which make it sort of easier to imagine these fantastical stories. Here you go. Lots of these. And thank you.
So I think I love that.
Do tell us about.
So we found a very amazing illustrator called Onkar Fondekar, who has been doing book covers for a very long time. And so when he heard about the concept, he was completely excited that Puranas that is my favorite area. I wish we could have illustrated every story in this book, 100 of them, but that was not feasible. So we went for 20. But I think everyone has just completely loved his work. And like I've said in my list of thank yous, his art just captures the perfume of every story. That is what he has done.
It absolutely, brings everything to life. It's truly incredible. In one of the interviews, you also mention, how futuristic and modern the Puranas are, and the fact that it touches on even LGBTQ topics. Which story in particular?
So there is a character. So, to go back to the story. So there's a lady called Tara. Now again, this story, while of course talks about the LGBTQ, it also again gives you a sense of how empowered the women were in the Puranas. So there's a lady called Tara who was married to Brihaspati. Brihaspati is supposed to be the commander of the gods. But Brihaspati is so caught up in war and in everything else that he has no time for Tara. So Tara is a neglected wife. And what do neglected wives do mostly? Tara has an affair with Chandra. Chandra being this amazingly handsome god. So Chandra and Tara elope. And after a point, there's a war that happens to bring Tara back between the gods and the demons, because Chandra is sided with the demons. At the end of the war, truce is called and Tara is called to the battlefield. And Tara comes and she's not punished, she's not judged. She simply said, go back to your husband. That is all you have to do. Tara says, fine, I will. But what about this one? And she unveils her belly and now she's pregnant. And she's asked, whose child is this? And she refuses to answer. Then the child from inside speaks out that, mother, I have the right to know who my father is. Tell me, is it Chandra or is it Brihaspati? So Tara has to answer the child. She says, you are the seed of Chandra. So the rule is passed, and again, how wonderful is this rule? Where again it is said that no, doesn't matter who the father of the child is, since you are married to Brihaspati, you will go back to him, and Brihaspati is ordered to take care of this child. Brihaspati refuses that this is not my son, and yet he said, you have to obey what has been decreed. So Brihaspati curses the unborn child and says, from when you are born, you will be born a neuter. You will neither be male nor be female. So when he is born, he is called Buddh, and Buddh is born neither male nor female. On the other hand, there's a king called Sudyumna. Sudyumna once enters a forest, and to his horror, he realizes that he has turned into a woman. He finds out that he sees Mahadev in front of him, and he discovers that this is supposed to be a love spot for Mahadev and Parvati. So Mahadev has created a magic in this particular forest that any male who enters would become a woman, because he would not want a male gaze to fall on Parvati when they are making love. So Sudyumna has not turned into a woman, and he falls at Mahadev's feet that, I cannot be a woman, I'm a king, my kingdom needs me, my people need me. So Mahadev says, I'll modify the curse. You will stay a woman for one particular month. The next month, you'll again turn back to your male gender. So every month, you will keep alternating. You will be male for one month, and female for another month. Ultimately, so on one hand, you have Buddha, who has no gender. And now we have Sudyumna, who has both genders, as Sudyumna and Ila. And ultimately, Buddha and Ila marry. So these two so-called unfortunate souls come together in a way to complete each other. And from them comes the Chandravanshi dynasty, which is where Krishna takes birth later on as the Chandravanshi. So and this is writing happening thousands of years back. So that is what I meant, how futuristic, just how non-judgmental and how accommodating the Puranas were.
Yeah, and the discussion starts at least,
Exactly.
This is thousands of years ago, and we're barely able to talk about these things now.
Exactly.
So it's really, really brilliant.
And what is interesting is, since we talk about the Chandravanshi dynasty, so there is the Suryavanshi dynasty, there's the Chandravanshi dynasty. Suryavanshi dynasty, you have Vishnu taking birth as Ram in Treta Yuga. In the Chandravanshi dynasty, takes birth as Krishna in Dwapar Yuga. Now the sun stays the same no matter what. That is the natural state of the sun, which is why Ram is Maryada Purushottam Ram. He is exactly, every rule is followed. No rule is broken. Everything is a very clear good or bad, because that is what the sun symbolizes. The moon waxes and wanes. The moon never stays the same. It is never the shape. Every night, it's a different shape. So when Krishna takes birth, nothing is as fixed as it was for Ram. Every rule can be interpreted in a million ways. So that is how Ram and Krishna differ from each other.
Interesting. The other concept, sorry, I have pages and pages of notes. But what's also interesting is the concept of time and how it was introduced to mark the various yugas, right? There's the Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga, right? How did you relate that through the story? How do you string that through the story?
So that, I think, is just a question of chronology, because it starts with Satyuga, the stories, and then of course it moves across every yuga, and finally it ends with the Sarpa Satra, which is the snake sacrifice in Kali Yuga. But what the interesting thing about the yugas, again in the Puranas, the way it is mentioned, that so Brahma creates dharma in the form of a bull, and the bull is told, and dharma predicts. He tells the bull that in Satyuga you will be standing on 4 feet. The 4 feet, every foot symbolizes something like austerity or piety or compassion or truthfulness, something. It says in Satyuga, you will have all the 4 feet, because people will practice every virtue possible. When you come to Treta Yuga, you will lose 1 foot. You'd only have 3 feet in Treta Yuga. In Dwapar, you'll only have 2 feet. And now in Kali, poor Dharma is standing only on 1 leg. So we are waiting for Satyuga to happen again, so you can get all the 4, the rest of the 3 feet back.
Yes. So going back to Satyarth's other Roop, right? He's a graduate of St. Stephen's College, and you did journalism.
Yes.
Followed by a stint with CNN IBN as a journalist between 2007 and 2011. And as I mentioned, the Midas Touch, his very first book, The Emperor's Riddle, instantly, of course, as you expect, went on to be a bestseller. And the Times of India called it History Meets Mystery, right? Amish Tripathi calls it a fantastic blend of myth, imagination, and mystery. So Satyarth, it seems like all your books are rooted in history, mythology, and this mystery angle. How do you flip-flop between all these various genres? Started with mystery, huh?
Yeah. So I have been hopping genres, as you very rightly pointed. If I even Sridevi, if you see, she has kind of entered mythology now. The way it is, it is.
It's
so,
history, mythology.
Like I was seeing one of Shekhar Kapoor's interview when he's asked that why is Mr. India still such a loved movie? People still talk about it, love about it. So Mr. India has now entered mythology. So Hawa, Hawaii, Mogambo, they are a part of your culture and mythology. So how do you fight mythology? How do you forget mythology? So you're right, mytho history. I think I've always had a very soft corner for for spectacle, for grandeur, for something that is widescreen and
epic, the porous screen,
something that is epic. So I think which is why history and mytho, they very easily lend themselves to those genres. So I think that is why the fascination. Also the fact that I, as a writer, I love to explore genres also because I myself get very bored if I keep writing in the same genre. I've been given very friendly advice that stick to one particular genre, create a reader base which identifies with the kind of writing and genre that you do. But I just say that I'm just way too talented to do that.
They say that's a sign of intelligence.
I have to,
right?
I just hop across these, and the fact that every book has been appreciated. Might as well continue the way it is.
Phenomenal. What was the storyline of Emperor's Riddle?
So Emperor's Riddle.
And how did you get around to write? What was that moment?
So I call my first book a complete freak act of nature. It was nothing was planned. I was just, I think I was rereading Angels and Demons, Dan Brown, and I just had this question in my mind that do we have something similar in our own Indian history and culture, something esoteric, something that can be something in a similar Dan Brownish zone. And I was researching, and this very amazing thing just leaped up from the screen of my laptop, and I was completely blown away. To realize that something in India so fascinating, to realize that the world's oldest secret brotherhood was created in India.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I was like, this deserves to be told as a story. So that's how I think my story, my first book found me. I didn't find it. It just made its way into my life and gripped me, and I had to write this book, and that's how the first book happened. It just completely happened on its own.
And then it just went on to be a bestseller.
Well, thankfully that book did well, and so I think it's and then I followed it up with another thriller called Venom, which released 2 weeks before pandemic hit. So that book just completely disappeared. Out of obviously because of what the situation happened. So, but this one did really well, and now we are planning to ship this book to Harper because Harper wants to kind of give it a new lease of life. So that this book reaches a lot more audience.
Emperor's Riddle. Who was your original publisher?
It was a publishing house in Delhi called Amaryllis.
Okay. So, what next after Mahakatha?
So after Mahagatha, Harper wants a second Mahagatha, and I said I need to find another rich vein of stories for
you
that.
Need to find 100 more stories.
Exactly. So I said until that happens, I will not, I will not touch Mahagatha. I don't want it because the kind of feedback one is getting is that we want something at least better, if not as good as what it is. And readers have been very, very, the feedback has been extremely positive. I mean, I get what is very heartening for me in case of Mahagatha is that the book has cut across generations. So I get feedback from young readers, and I get feedback from older readers. Like this one young girl, she messaged me saying that my mother used to read out stories to me as a child. Now I'm doing that for her using your book. So things like that, you realize that your book has found a heart across generations. So that is always lovable, which is why I don't want to tarnish it by creating another product that is not as good as the first one. So I've said, let's wait for a similar, vein of stories. Only then should we proceed.
Pressure is on now.
Yeah, kind of. I've given them another idea though in the mytho zone. Which the proposal they're kind of taking a look at. So let's see how that turns out.
Okay. I have one last question. Since I, profess not to know much about this, what would you say is the definition between the difference between the Vedas and the Puranas?
So, see, first of all, the Vedas and the Puranas, in between them, it's about almost 5,000 years. The time gap is quite a huge time gap. In fact, the Vedas were composed first, then came the Upanishads, then came the Ramayana, then came the Mahabharata, and then come the Puranas. So the Puranas, if you see the list, they are the most recent composition out of all of them. Also because the Puranas were basically and have always been a part of our oral tradition. They were always, those stories were always transferred from generations orally, verbally.
Right,
They're part of what we call the Shruti, where we hear. So it was only much later that they was put into writing and composed as books. So, and even those texts were constantly drafted and redrafted across centuries. So what we have right now may not be the original form of what the Puranas would have way back then, but nevertheless, that's what we have right now. The basic difference, though, is that the Vedas have all the teachings. They have all the wisdom, all the do's and the don'ts, the commandments are the Vedas.
I see.
Those are those are illustrated in the form of stories in the Puranas. So think of it like the Bible and the parables. That is
Right.
what it is ultimately. The very
Right.
basic difference between the two is that, and which I think is a huge. And that was wonderfully done, because if you understand, there was one point of time where the Vedas were not accessible to a particular class of people. They were only accessible to the Brahmins. So how do you
see.
then propagate the values to
Yeah.
the other in the society? How does that happen? So
Right.
then the Puranas were created where the same values are being taught to you through the form of stories. And what better medium than stories to impart wisdom? That always works.
Always,
So that
yeah.
is what it is, which is why when it was stories, I had to turn to Puranas, because that is where you find the rich treasure of stories comes from there.
Fabulous. Questions? Okay. I'm going to now pass
Sure,
the
yeah.
mic.
Hello, Satyarth. So it was a great listening to you. So I'm a big Krishna Bhakta. So that comes from my grandma, because I've heard a lot of stories from her. So I see you write a lot of mythological stories. So is that your grandma told you a lot of stories
Yes,
about?
my grandpa actually, not my grandma. Yeah, a lot of it comes from because in fact my first 5 years of my life I stayed with my grandparents, not with my parents. So, and my grandfather was a very well-read man, very learned himself, and I remember sitting on his lap and absorbing stories and poems and literature. I think that was a wonderful process of osmosis for me, at that age. So I think a lot of it definitely comes from all those teachings, which is why this book is dedicated to him. It is for him.
So I'm Dr. Kirti from Anna University. I'm a professor in chemistry at Anna University. The young generation, they don't take a lot of essence from the mythological stories. Amish, Sudhamurti ma'am, they are all now, taking the stories to them. Where do you see yourself among them? Will these stories get into the new generation?
You tell me, where do my readers want to see me among them? So I don't know. I mean, again, like I said, I write because I fall in love with an idea, and that grips my neck and makes me write. So nothing else is a consideration where I want to, I see myself vis-a-vis someone else. I mean, but I think what is wonderful is that Mytho is such a exciting space right now in Indian writing, also because, like we are today that generation where not all of us have grandparents, we are much more nuclear families. So that layer of storytellers is missing in a lot of families. So I tell in every conference that I think Devdutt has become the national grandfather in a way, where he's telling stories and everyone is listening to him. So I'm glad to be a part of that tradition where I can, put out my own content within that context, and so I'm glad that the feedback that I get from Mahagatha is that you've opened the doors of Puranas for us. You've made Puranas accessible to us, because what was happening earlier was that Puranas is an extremely complex and heavy word to even think about. How do you even engage with the Puranas? So this is an entry point, and through stories, and nothing better than stories to engage and make someone interested in. So I think that ways I'm glad, and the book has sold well. We have sold the last count was 25,000 copies, so the book is already a bestseller. So very happy.
Satyarth, so my last question would be, we have seen Puranas, loving the women, but it is also seen that there is a lot of oppression also.
Absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah.
the entire spectrum is what you find. So while there is one hand, there is, I said, the story of, the Bringi and Parvati, or that is story of Tara, how she is able to, she's not judged for what she did, or for someone like a story of Sangya, for example.
Sita also, yeah.
No, I'm talking about the women who are able to make choices and who are not judged. Like Sangya is the wife of Surya, and Sangya leaves Surya and walks out of her marriage because Surya is so hot that she can't find pleasure in their lovemaking. And the Puranas don't judge these women, whether it's Sangya or Tara, they're not judged, Or the story of Swaha, again, a very short story that everybody has fallen in love with. So the gods come to Brahma one morning and say, we are famished, we have nothing to eat. Brahma says, how is that possible? I have a very simple system of symbiosis where once you put whatever yajnas happen on earth, when humans put oblations in that fire, those oblations are supposed to reach you. That is your food. He says Agni is not making the transfer possible for some reason. And Agni says, I don't seem to have the agency to do that. I don't know why. And then Brahma invokes Prakriti, Mother Nature. Mother Nature creates a goddess. And Brahma says, you will now be the conduit for us to make the transfer possible. And that goddess is called Swaha. So Brahma now makes the law that in every yajna, the last line must end with the word Swaha. Only then will the transfer be possible.
We didn't know
So
that.
here you have alpha male God standing completely helpless. A woman comes as their savior. So that is there. And yet you have stories of Vrinda, who burns herself because Vishnu defiles her. So again, patriarchy is not completely absent, but we were still in a much better position back then than we are now.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Satyarth, the mythological fiction category I think is fairly new for our generation. So, what genre do you like to read?
So I love mysteries. I mean, I think my first love has always been thrillers. I have grown up reading, whether it's Agatha Christie's or Sherlock Holmes or Irving Wallace, and now of course. So I think that will always be my most loved genre. Which is my first two books were thrillers, and then of course I love mythology. I love reading mytho. I love reading history. I'm a huge fan of history, historical epics, historical fiction, and I think also biographies. I love to read about inspiring lives. So I think these 4 or 5 genres are what inspire.
Lovely. I love thrillers too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
my name is Upasana and I've always loved reading books. My Instagram handle is called The Book Reporter. So I look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much.
reviewing
Thank you
your
so
book.
much. Thank you.
Something that is topical in the world of science and computer life and everything. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. And then every now and then you see all kinds of things happening. Like somebody said that they got a message and a picture on the phone of her husband saying, look, I need money desperately. And they find that somebody picked that picture from the Facebook or the Instagram and made this whole thing. And somebody, now when you see all this change happening in the world, and then we have the mythology which has all the different kinds of characters were good, bad, everything. And today we have a label that we put on what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. How does one fuse the whole thing to make a good life?
I don't know, ma'am. If at your age you haven't figured it out, I think at my age I'm still figuring it out. So I would not dare to give you any kind of advice or any kind of wisdom. I think it should be the other way around. But I mean, I can just talk vis-a-vis the Puranas. Is that I think I can just leave you with the last story where at the end of everything, all the mess, all the good, all the bad that happened throughout the universe, at the end of it, so Janmejaya asks Brahma that, because Janmejaya is now the first king of Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga has begun. We are living in Kali Yuga right now. And he asks Brahma that, is there something that we can take hope from? Something that can help us navigate this evil Yuga until Satya Yuga is back again. Give us something, give us some hope. And Brahma says, there is one thing that I can tell you, one thing that, that was not there in the other yugas, which is very good in Kali Yuga. He says what? He says in all the other yugas, it was after a lot of self-introspection, lot of self-realization, lot of meditation. After you did all of that, you gained just a little merit. Which is why sages spent thousands and thousands of years doing that again and again to acquire merit. But it would take a lot of time and yield very little result. In Kali Yuga, it's the exact opposite. Here, do self-realization, just introspect even for a little while, and you will earn enormous merit. So that, I think, is what I can leave you with, is if all of us look within ourselves, even for once a day, and maybe just we'll get a lot of merit as per Brahma. So if you accept his word, so I think that should give us some hope in Kali Yuga. Thank you.
For me personally, I really enjoyed hearing you. I'm sure everyone here did. And I express a heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest author and sincere appreciation for gracing us with your knowledge, your creativity, and your passion. I'm amazed to see the wide variety, the range of what you write. Also, we thank Praneeth, our Ehsaas woman from Amritsar, for coming in and doing this with us. To our audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention span. And it is your love and constant support that keeps us geared up at all times to do more and more events. I also would like to thank our association with ITC. Sanjukta, are you here? Thank you so much for your support. Prabha Khaitan Foundation promotes cross-state cultural understanding and appreciation. A mosaic of culture forms the backbone of our nation, contributing to its vibrancy and richness. This is to support our ongoing efforts to foster unity and appreciation of the rich cultural heritage. Keeping this in mind, we are pleased to facilitate the author with a Lucknowi chikankari scarf. Chikankari is the signature handloom of the city of Nawabs. It is very traditional and royal. Lucknowi chikankari needlework embroidery is a regal fusion of fashion and elegance. I now request Miss Anita Ratnam to come up and facilitate the author with the scarf as a token of gratitude from us. Thank you, Anita.
As far as I can see, as far as time extends, no soul was ever born outside this home. No heart has ever beat outside this